Some heirs think a trust fund with billions of dollars buys them a bulletproof vest. He certainly did. He threw his broken titanium laptop at my chest and called me an IT nerd, expecting me to quietly clean up his dirty digital messes. But he forgot one brutal rule of the modern age: whoever holds the server keys is the real god. So, instead of fixing his computer, I used it to erase his entire existence from the empire. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Madeline Ross. Floor 50 of the Vanguard Horizon Logistics Tower in Austin, Texas, does not feel like an office space. It feels like a cryogenic vault. The air up here is constantly filtered through 5 separate biometric environmental meshes, meticulously maintained at a perfect 20 degrees Celsius to ensure the quantum server clusters remain entirely stable. Outside the floor-to-ceiling reinforced glass, the relentless Texas sun beats down on the concrete grid of the city. But inside my domain, it is always a cool, calculated twilight. This floor is the beating digital heart of the world's largest autonomous transport technology corporation, and I am the one keeping it alive. I am 34 years old. I was not born into this pristine glass tower, nor was I handed a silver platter of stock options at birth. I crawled my way up from the damp, mold-scented basements of the American Midwest. I spent 15 excruciating years tearing apart fried motherboards, untangling spaghetti code for minimum wage, and fighting off the casual misogyny of the tech industry. Now, I sit at the very top. I am the chief cybersecurity architect. I am the sole creator of the labyrinthine firewall that protects Vanguard's proprietary artificial intelligence algorithms, a digital vault holding intellectual property valued at tens of billions of dollars. Within these 4 walls, I am the absolute authority. But of course, those who are born with immense privilege do not recognize earned authority. They only recognize bloodlines and bank accounts. The heavy pneumatic doors of the server room hissed open. I did not need to look up from my triple monitor setup to know exactly who had just breached my sanctuary. An aggressive, suffocating wave of custom-blended designer cologne violently assaulted the hyper-purified air of the room. It was an offensive, chemical stench of unearned wealth and overwhelming arrogance. Preston Sterling, 28 years old, chronically undisciplined, and the sole heir to our ruthless chief executive officer, Victoria Sterling. He wore a custom-tailored silk suit that undoubtedly cost more than my annual university tuition, yet he carried himself with the slouching, careless grace of a spoiled street thug playing a corporate dress-up game. He marched directly toward my workstation and slammed a heavy custom titanium-rimmed laptop onto my tempered glass desk. The sharp, violent crack of metal against glass echoed through the silent, rhythmic hum of the servers. "Fix my laptop, IT nerd," Preston barked, his voice dripping with condescension and unjustified annoyance. I slowly pushed my glasses up the bridge of my nose, deliberately taking my time before looking at him. "It just crashed while I was downloading the quarterly financial reports," he complained, crossing his arms and impatiently tapping his Italian leather shoe against the sterile floor tiles. "Get it done fast. I do not have all day to wait around for you glorified janitors to figure out how to do your jobs." "Financial reports?" I suppressed a deeply cynical smile. Preston Sterling had never read a financial report in his miserable, pampered life. He spent his days in the executive lounge, nursing hangovers and harassing the junior marketing staff. "Of course, Mr. Sterling," I said, my tone entirely flat and devoid of any human emotion. "Let me take a look." I flipped the heavy titanium lid open and rested my fingertips lightly on the keyboard. Instantly, I felt the intense heat radiating through the expensive metallic chassis. The internal cooling fans were screaming at maximum rotation, desperate to dissipate a massive thermal load. A rapid diagnostic shortcut revealed the CPU temperature was hovering dangerously at 92 degrees Celsius. That is an absolute absurdity for a machine supposedly processing simple text documents or spreadsheets. This was not a hardware failure. This was not a corrupted cache file or a bloated background operating system update. My instincts, sharpened by thousands of hours hunting down state-sponsored hackers, triggered an immediate, silent red alert in my mind. There was a massive, unauthorized backdoor operating at maximum capacity, aggressively siphoning data from the machine. Preston was not doing any corporate work. My rapid keystrokes peeled back the surface layer of his operating system, revealing the ugly truth underneath. He had manually bypassed the internal biometric authorization protocols. Someone had provided him with a physical flash drive loaded with highly sophisticated, military-grade malware, and he had plugged it directly into this secure device. The malicious code was specifically designed to silently rip right through the basic access tiers, establish a hidden bridgehead, and latch directly onto the company's central mainframe. The arrogant fool standing before me, complaining about financial reports, was actively attempting to steal the core source code of the Vanguard Autonomous Transport AI. He was cracking his own family's vault from the inside. He truly thought I was just a lowly, ignorant tech drone who would blindly run a standard antivirus scan and hand the loaded weapon right back to him. He had absolutely no idea that he had just handed the rope for his own execution directly to the hangman. Standard corporate protocol dictates that the moment I detect an unauthorized breach of this magnitude, I must instantly trigger a global network lockdown and summon the internal security forces. But pressing that big red panic button would only lead to a messy, predictable corporate cover-up. Victoria Sterling would bury the incident deep underground to protect the family name, and the arrogant boy standing in front of me would simply get a slap on the wrist before being reassigned to some figurehead position. I had a much more permanent solution in mind. I forced my facial muscles to relax into a perfectly bland, utterly harmless expression. It seems your machine has encountered a severe cache memory overload, sir. I lied smoothly, keeping my voice entirely subservient. It will take me about 15 minutes to clear the corrupted sectors and restore optimal performance. Preston scoffed loudly, rolling his eyes as he turned his back to me and began aggressively typing on his mobile phone. The moment his attention shifted, my fingers flew across the keyboard. I immediately severed the laptop's connection to our internal network, effectively air-gapping the device. It was now a digital island, completely cut off from the main servers and any wireless signals. Working with the surgical precision of a bomb disposal expert, I bypassed his clumsy executable files, extracted the entire payload of the military-grade malware, and cloned it onto a heavily encrypted, standalone server completely under my control. I was now holding a perfect mirror to the weapon he intended to use, and I needed to see exactly who had forged it. I dove deep into the underlying architecture of the malicious code. The routing protocols were incredibly sophisticated, actively bouncing through a dozen encrypted proxy servers across the globe before settling on a dark web node known for facilitating massive illicit financial transactions. It did not take long for me to bypass the node's rudimentary security layers and peer directly into Preston's private digital life. What I found was a spectacular, catastrophic disaster. The golden heir to the Vanguard Horizon Empire was drowning. He was exactly $50 million in the hole to a syndicate of underground casinos operating beneath the glittering surface of Las Vegas. These were the brutal, unforgiving kind of creditors who do not care about your mother's corporate title or your expensive suits. They had given him a strict deadline, and the sheer desperation was practically radiating from his digital footprint. But the gambling debt was only the first layer of the rot. As I sifted through his encrypted communication logs, the full, horrifying scope of his treason came into sharp focus. Preston was not just trying to steal the artificial intelligence source code to pawn it off and pay his bookies. He had struck a lucrative deal with a rival conglomerate, a shadow corporation deeply entrenched in international arms smuggling. They desperately wanted our autonomous navigation algorithms to retrofit their illegal supply chains and evade global border security. However, Preston's greed went even deeper than simple corporate espionage. The malware he plugged into my network had a secondary, deeply destructive function. Once the source code was successfully extracted, the program was designed to deploy a catastrophic virus directly into our active logistics network. It would simultaneously paralyze the navigation systems of all active Vanguard self-driving trucks across the entire country. The resulting chaos would be absolute. Supply chains would freeze. The national media would have an absolute field day reporting on the catastrophic failure of autonomous transport. And naturally, the company's stock price would instantly plummet to the bottom of the ocean. Preston had already leveraged what little clean capital he had left to set up massive short-selling positions on Vanguard stock through dummy corporations. He intended to crash his own mother's company, sell the stolen technology to violent criminals, and walk away hundreds of millions of dollars richer from the resulting financial bloodbath. My workstation monitor vibrated with an incoming alert. It was a direct text message from Preston, sent from just a few feet away. "Hurry up, you useless nerd. If my machine is not fixed in 2 minutes, I will have my mother terminate your contract and blacklist you from the entire tech industry." I read the message twice. A cold, hard thrill washed over me. He wanted a working machine. I was going to give him an entire universe to play with. In the span of 12 minutes, my fingers danced across the mechanical keyboard, weaving an intricate web of digital deception. I constructed an entirely fabricated internal network. I called it the Ghost Fleet. It was a flawless, one-to-one mirror simulation of the Vanguard core operating system. I populated this virtual sandbox with millions of lines of dummy source code, useless strings of encrypted gibberish that looked exactly like our proprietary algorithms. I built virtual servers, fake security checkpoints, and simulated the active, real-time telemetry of exactly 10,000 autonomous vehicles moving across virtual highways. To his malware, it would look like an absolute goldmine. In reality, it was a beautifully constructed digital padded cell. I carefully rerouted his backdoor entry point, funneling its extraction protocols directly into the Ghost Fleet. Whatever he tried to steal, he would only be grabbing handfuls of digital smoke. Finally, I closed the terminal, wiped my own access logs, and gently closed the titanium lid of his laptop. I stood up, walked around the heavy glass desk, and handed the machine back to him using both hands, adopting the posture of an obedient, low-level subordinate. "All finished, Mr. Sterling," I said, offering him a perfectly submissive, reassuring smile. "The temporary files were heavily corrupted, but I have purged the system entirely. Your laptop is running perfectly smooth again. Absolutely no data was lost." Preston snatched the computer from my hands with a harsh, dismissive grunt. He did not even bother to say thank you. "About time. Stick to cleaning up my digital trash, and maybe you will get to keep your job." He turned on his expensive leather heels and strutted out of the server room, completely oblivious to the fact that I was not a janitor sweeping up his mess. I was the architect who had just meticulously locked the door of his prison cell. The executive boardroom on the 51st floor was designed to make you feel completely insignificant. It was a cavernous space lined with sound-absorbing acoustic panels and dominated by a massive, polished obsidian table that looked more like a sacrificial altar than a piece of office furniture. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the atmosphere in the room was suffocatingly tense. Victoria Sterling sat rigidly at the head of the table. The chief executive officer possessed a stare that could freeze boiling water. Today was not a standard quarterly review. This was an evaluation of blood. The board of directors had formally gathered to assess her son's leadership capabilities. The underlying purpose of this agonizing corporate charade was to determine if Preston was finally mature enough to unlock the remaining $500 million of his family trust fund upon his impending 30th birthday. Preston stood at the front of the room, bathed in the sharp glow of a massive holographic display. He was entirely in his element here, armed with a sleek laser pointer and a blindingly white, perfectly veneered smile. His presentation was titled Future Synergies and Technology Optimization. It was, of course, complete and utter garbage. "The future of autonomous logistics relies entirely on fluid adaptability," Preston declared. pacing back and forth with heavily rehearsed confidence. We cannot remain shackled by archaic, paranoid security protocols that actively bottleneck our artificial intelligence development. I sat quietly in the darkest corner of the room, technically present only to ensure the holographic projectors did not malfunction. My face was a carefully constructed mask of professional boredom, but beneath the surface, my mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour. I listened intently to his carefully chosen words. He was actively planting the seeds of his alibi. He was meticulously laying the psychological groundwork to blame the impending catastrophic system failure on the supposedly rigid and outdated cybersecurity infrastructure. My infrastructure. He was essentially telling the board of directors that when the digital walls inevitably collapsed, it would be the fault of the builders, not the boy who deliberately opened the gates for the invading barbarians. While Preston aggressively waved his hands and dazzled the clueless board members with empty corporate buzzwords, I looked down at the encrypted tablet resting securely on my lap. The screen was vertically split. On the left side, I monitored the live, stable telemetry of our actual server farms. On the right side, I was watching a flawless, real-time mirror of the smartphone currently sitting inside Preston's left trouser pocket. The stark contrast between his public performance and his hidden reality was nothing short of breathtaking. Above the obsidian table, he was the visionary heir apparent, passionately arguing for the bold future of Vanguard Horizon. Below the table, his left hand was buried deep in his pocket, his thumb moving with frantic, practiced precision. Through my tablet, I watched him actively navigate a heavily shielded offshore financial application. He was systematically authorizing hundreds of rapid-fire short-selling contracts. He was betting tens of millions of borrowed dollars that Vanguard stock was about to suffer a catastrophic, unprecedented market plunge. Every single time he clicked confirm under the table, he smiled just a little bit brighter for the executive sitting above it. I continued to passively monitor his background processes, scanning the outgoing data packets silently queuing up on his device. That was the exact moment my blood turned to absolute ice. Hidden beneath the massive volume of financial transactions, Preston had established a delayed action automated script tied directly into our internal corporate mail server. I quietly intercepted the data packets and unpacked the hidden contents. They were heavily encrypted email threads. I ran a rapid decryption key algorithm and read the raw text. My breath caught sharply in my throat. The sender address on every single one of those forged emails was mine. Preston had not just planned a massive corporate heist. He had engineered a flawless, devastating frame-up. The drafted emails contained highly fabricated access logs, doctored chat transcripts, and fake offshore wire transfer receipts indicating that Madeline Ross, the chief cybersecurity architect, had grown deeply disgruntled with her compensation package and actively solicited illegal offers from rival tech conglomerates. The final email queued in the chain was addressed to the very same dark web syndicate he was actually doing business with, explicitly offering them the artificial intelligence source code for a massive sum of untraceable cryptocurrency. The sheer, calculated malice of it was almost impressive. The moment his malware triggered the system crash, these emails were scheduled to automatically deploy across the entire Vanguard internal network, permanently broadcasting my fake treason to the executive board, the media, and the federal authorities. He fully intended to serve me up on a silver platter as the ultimate corporate scapegoat. He wanted the Federal Bureau of Investigation to physically drag me out of this glass building in handcuffs. He wanted my career completely destroyed, my life permanently ruined, and my freedom stolen, all while he confidently walked away with his trust fund fully unlocked and his illegal offshore accounts overflowing with dirty money. I stared blankly at the glowing tablet. The cold, sterile air of the boardroom suddenly felt highly electric. He really wanted to play God with my entire existence. He had severely miscalculated the actual extent of my power. I did not panic. I did not leap out of my chair and alert the chief executive officer. I simply went to work. I needed to ensure that Preston remained absolutely, blindly confident until the very last possible second. He needed to be completely unaware of the fact that his meticulously sharpened digital guillotine was currently facing the wrong direction. I opened a covert command line interface on my tablet and injected a microscopic, entirely undetectable data payload directly into the core operating system of his smartphone. Working silently in the deep shadows of the boardroom, I seized total administrative control of his device's user interface. I surgically isolated the notification center and the visual display drivers. It took me exactly less than 3 minutes to rewrite the localized display rules. From this exact moment forward, no matter what catastrophic failures actually occurred on his end, no matter if his dark web buyers screamed at him or his bank accounts rapidly evaporated into nothingness, his phone screen would only display exactly what I wanted it to display. I hard-coded a continuous series of bright green check marks and highly reassuring progress bars into his visual feed. If a financial transaction failed, his screen would instantly report a 100% success rate. If an urgent warning message arrived from his creditors, it would be instantly filtered out into the trash and replaced with a forged system notification reading. Operations normal, executing perfectly. I had effectively sealed him inside a custom-built digital sensory deprivation tank, willingly feeding him a comforting, entirely fabricated reality while the actual ground violently opened up beneath his expensive leather shoes. At the front of the room, Preston confidently wrapped up his presentation to a round of polite, approving applause from the sycophantic board members. Victoria Sterling offered a slow, measured nod of acknowledgement, an incredibly rare sign of maternal approval. Preston beamed with absolute, unchecked pride. He returned to his heavy leather chair, sitting back with the relaxed, sprawling posture of a conquering king. He pulled his compromised phone from his pocket, casually resting it flat on his thigh where his mother could not easily see it. Through my mirrored tablet, I watched him prepare his final, fatal move. He opened a heavily encrypted messaging application. He rapidly typed out a brief, coded message destined for the waiting arms of the weapons smugglers sitting on the other side of the world. "Get ready to receive." The IT nerd opened the door. He hit send. The trap was perfectly set, but he was the one standing squarely on the pressure plate. The heavy antique grandfather clock standing in the corner of the boardroom chimed exactly 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The time for corporate theatrics had officially ended. The time for the slaughter had begun. Preston casually flipped open the heavy titanium lid of his laptop. Under the guise of pulling up supplementary charts for the board members, his fingers quickly danced across the keyboard, navigating to the hidden directory where his weapon lay dormant. He did not hesitate. He did not show a single ounce of remorse for the thousands of lives he was about to actively endanger on the public highways. He simply smirked, pressed the enter key, and executed the command. In his mind, the dominoes were finally falling. He envisioned the catastrophic chain reaction ripping through the Vanguard Horizon network. He pictured exactly 10,000 massive, 18-wheeler transport vehicles suddenly going blind while traveling at 70 miles per hour across the country. He imagined the resulting multi-vehicle collisions, the blazing infernos of tangled metal, the screaming sirens, and the immediate brutal collapse of his mother's empire on Wall Street. On his end, the simulation I had painstakingly designed performed flawlessly. His screen violently flashed a brilliant, blood-red warning. A massive dialog box dominated his display, reading, "Critical error, total system disconnect, global fleet offline." Preston immediately sprang to his feet, knocking his heavy leather chair backward with a loud crash. His performance was absolutely award-winning. He widened his eyes in perfectly feigned horror, his voice trembling with just the right amount of manufactured panic. "Mother," he shouted, his voice echoing sharply off the acoustic panels. "The entire navigation system is collapsing. We are under a massive cyber attack. The core source code is being actively extracted, and the global fleet has just gone completely dark." The boardroom erupted into absolute chaos. Highly paid executives scrambled over each other, shouting into their mobile phones. Victoria Sterling shot up from her seat, her usually impenetrable composure finally cracking as she demanded immediate answers from her terrified vice presidents. Preston leaned heavily across the obsidian table, staring intensely at his mother. "The stock is going to absolutely freefall the second this hits the newswire. You need to unlock my emergency trust fund right now. Authorize the release of the entire $500 million so I can aggressively pump capital into the market and buy up the crashing shares to save this company before we lose everything." He was practically salivating. He was playing the hero while holding the knife he had just plunged into their collective backs. But while the executives panicked and Preston mentally counted his impending billions, I remained completely motionless in the shadows. I looked down at my encrypted tablet. The reality of the situation was entirely different. Out in the physical world, beneath the bright afternoon sun, exactly 10,000 autonomous Vanguard trucks continued rolling smoothly down the interstate highways. Their advanced optical sensors read the lane markers with flawless precision. Their engines hummed with perfect efficiency. Not a single vehicle deviated by even a fraction of an inch. They were entirely, blissfully unaware of the digital apocalypse Preston thought he had just unleashed. His highly expensive military-grade malware had not touched a single strand of Vanguard's actual operating system. Instead, the moment he pressed execute, his program had plunged headfirst into the ghost fleet. On my tablet, I watched the digital visualization of the attack. It was a spectacular, silent fireworks display of violent code. The malware aggressively tore through my simulated firewalls, ravenously devouring millions of lines of completely useless, procedurally generated garbage data. It confidently encrypted fake servers and locked down empty virtual terminals, proudly reporting its devastating success back to Preston's machine. It was a dog viciously attacking its own reflection in a mirror, entirely convinced it was winning a bloody fight. Simultaneously, the second phase of his plan was actively executing half a world away. Deep within a heavily fortified underground bunker in Eastern Europe, the rival conglomerate specializing in illegal arms smuggling received a massive, encrypted data packet. Their dark web node lit up with a successful transfer notification. They genuinely believed they had just acquired the holy grail of autonomous logistics algorithms for a mere fraction of its actual market value. Their lead technicians eagerly cracked the encryption and opened the massive file. They expected to find the sophisticated, elegant architecture of the Vanguard artificial intelligence. Instead, they found the digital equivalent of a thermonuclear device. I had not simply fed them useless junk. I had meticulously crafted a severely modified, highly aggressive reverse ransomware payload and buried it deep within the dummy source code. Traditional ransomware locks your files and demands a massive payment in untraceable cryptocurrency to give you the key. My creation was significantly less polite. It did not ask for money. It did not negotiate. It simply annihilated everything it touched. The moment those smugglers opened the file, my payload detonated. I watched the telemetry data stream back to my tablet in real time. The violent code instantly latched onto their primary operating system, bypassing their incredibly weak perimeter defenses. It spread like a virulent wildfire through their localized network. It aggressively sought out their financial ledgers, their dark web digital wallets, their encrypted client lists, and their heavily guarded inventory manifests. Instead of locking the files, it fundamentally rewrote the binary architecture, permanently corrupting the data at the deepest physical sector level. Within exactly 35 seconds, their massive server farm was reduced to a smoking pile of useless silicon and molten plastic. I had effectively wiped their entire criminal syndicate completely off the global digital map. Back in the boardroom, the shouting continued. Preston was still aggressively demanding access to his trust fund, his eyes wide with fake desperation. I calmly adjusted my glasses. It was time for the final phase. I opened the centralized financial terminal on my tablet. Through the back door I had previously established, I had direct, unfiltered access to every single one of Preston's private accounts. I could see the massive, highly leveraged short-selling contracts he had initiated. I could see the millions of dollars in dirty money he had stashed in offshore tax havens across the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. I took a slow, deep breath and began a silent, internal countdown. 3, 2, 1. I executed the severance protocol. In less than a heartbeat, I deployed a suffocating digital net around his entire financial existence. I actively intercepted the routing protocols for his specific banking identifiers. I did not steal his money. I simply built an impenetrable, invisible wall around it. I actively blocked every single dollar attempting to enter his accounts, and I permanently froze every single dollar attempting to leave. I fundamentally altered the way his banks communicated with the global financial network. To the rest of the world, Preston Sterling's accounts simply ceased to exist. His massive wealth was instantly transformed into useless, frozen pixels trapped inside a dead digital void. He was now completely, utterly bankrupt. He did not have a single cent to his name. Yet, because of the custom sensory deprivation tank I had meticulously built into his smartphone, his screen continued to brightly display his massive, fraudulent wealth. His phone chirped with a cheerful, entirely fabricated notification, falsely assuring him that his short-selling profits were actively compounding by the second. He stood there in his incredibly expensive silk suit, surrounded by screaming executives, grinning inwardly like a triumphant king. He had absolutely no idea that the crown he thought he was wearing was already burning a hole straight through his skull. Preston slipped out of the boardroom under the guise of contacting the Rapid Response Cybersecurity team. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind him, instantly muting the frantic screams of the executives inside. Out here in the dimly lit, carpeted hallway, the air was entirely still. A sickening, arrogant grin stretched across his face. He pulled a secondary, untraceable burner phone from his inner jacket pocket and dialed the encrypted international number. He expected a chorus of praise. He expected confirmation that his initial payment of $25 million was already resting comfortably in his Swiss bank account. The line connected with a sharp click. "Listen to me, you miserable corporate rat," a voice snarled through the receiver. The thick, heavily accented voice was completely devoid of professional courtesy. It was radiating pure, unfiltered, homicidal rage. "I do not know who you think you are playing with, but you just signed your own death warrant." Preston stopped walking. The smug grin slid right off his face. "What are you talking about? The payload was delivered perfectly. I saw the confirmation on my end. You have the source code." "We have a localized digital apocalypse," the voice roared so loudly the speaker on the burner phone violently vibrated. "Whatever poison you hid inside that package just melted our entire primary server cluster. We lost our encrypted ledgers. We lost our client identities. Our physical hardware is literally catching fire as we speak. You set us up, you arrogant little boy." "No, there has to be a mistake," Preston stammered, the first cold fingers of genuine terror gripping his throat. "It was the raw data. I extracted it myself." "The only thing getting extracted today is your blood," the smuggler spat. "But before we send our people to find you, we are taking what is owed to us. You made a fatal mistake when you used your private offshore routing numbers to establish the escrow connection. We have your digital footprint. We are inside your vaults. Sterling." The line went dead. Preston frantically dropped the burner phone on the thick carpet. He ripped his primary smartphone out of his pocket. The customized, comforting illusion I had built for him was now completely gone. I had remotely shattered the fake green check marks and allowed him to see the raw, unfiltered reality of his financial existence. He stared at the screen in absolute horror. The offshore banking applications he trusted with his life were actively bleeding out in real time. The violent criminals he had tried to partner with were using his own backdoor credentials to aggressively siphon every single cent he had hidden away in the Cayman Islands and Geneva. He watched the numbers plummet. $40 million, $20 million, $5 million, $0. Every single account registered under his dummy corporations hit absolute zero. He frantically checked his brokerage accounts. the ones holding his massive, highly leveraged short-selling contracts, because the stock market had not actually crashed. His margin calls were instantly triggered. The brokers were aggressively liquidating his remaining clean assets to cover the massive debts he had just created. Within the span of 2 minutes, Preston Sterling had gone from a man expecting a $500 million trust fund to a man drowning in insurmountable, catastrophic debt. His chest heaved. His face turned the color of spoiled milk. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the stomach. The malware, the fake data, the sudden, impossible breach of his accounts. There was only one person on the face of the planet who had physical access to his machine and the technical capability to engineer a trap this flawlessly devastating: the IT nerd. He did not take the elevator. He sprinted down the emergency stairwell, his expensive leather shoes echoing violently against the concrete steps. He burst through the pneumatic doors of the 50th floor, his lungs burning, his perfectly styled hair now a chaotic, sweaty mess. He charged straight into my sterile server room. He looked less like a corporate heir and more like a cornered, rabid animal. "What did you do?" Preston screamed, his voice cracking with a mixture of raw panic and explosive fury. He lunged across my tempered glass desk, his hands reaching out to physically grab the collar of my shirt. I did not flinch. I did not move a single muscle to defend myself. I simply looked up at him with eyes as cold and dead as the vacuum of space. The sheer, absolute absence of fear in my posture caused him to freeze just inches away from me. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his pampered life, that his physical intimidation meant absolutely nothing in my domain. I reached out and pressed a single button on my keyboard. The massive 80-inch monitor mounted on the wall directly behind me instantly flared to life. The room was bathed in a harsh, unforgiving white light. "I believe the question is not what I did," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the servers like a scalpel. "The question is what you did." On the massive screen, a high-definition audio waveform began to play. It was the crystal-clear recording of his phone call with the armed smugglers, perfectly capturing him negotiating the sale of Vanguard's proprietary code. Next to the waveform, a cascading list of his illegal short-selling contracts populated the screen, explicitly detailing his attempt to actively destroy his own mother's company. And right in the center, displayed in massive, glowing red font, was the live feed of his offshore bank accounts. The numbers proudly displayed a balance of precisely $0.00. Preston collapsed backward, his knees giving out as if the bones had been magically removed. He hit the floor hard. He stared at the giant screen, his mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. The undeniable, immutable proof of his complete destruction was staring right back at him. I stood up slowly. I smoothed down the front of my practical, inexpensive blazer. I walked around the desk and looked down at the miserable, broken creature whimpering on the sterile floor tiles. "You wanted me to fix your laptop," I asked softly, letting the silence hang heavily in the air for a brief moment. "I just fixed your entire life." A sudden, violent surge of desperation hijacked his body. Preston scrambled off the floor, practically crawling over my glass desk to reach my keyboard. His trembling fingers violently struck the keys. He was trying to access the final, sacred vault. He was trying to log into the Vanguard Family Trust Fund portal. It was his last remaining lifeline. If he could just authorize the release of the $500 million, he could pay off the angry criminals coming to kill him. He could flee the country. He could survive. He typed his private username. He furiously hammered his highly complex password into the system and slammed the enter key. The screen did not grant him salvation. The screen flashed a brilliant, blinding crimson. A massive dialog box appeared, dominating his entire field of vision. It was a message designed to completely sever the final thread of his sanity. The system coldly informed him, "Login error. Your password has been changed to access Revoked nerd." The final, undeniable realization of his total defeat completely shattered Preston's fragile mind. He let out a raw, guttural scream of pure rage. He spun around, his eyes wild and completely detached from reality. He lunged toward my workstation, grabbing the heavy steel and ergonomic mesh chair I used every day. He hoisted it high above his head, his face twisted into an ugly mask of desperation. He intended to smash it directly into the core quantum server racks housing my primary data drives, foolishly believing that destroying the physical hardware in this room would somehow erase the cloud-based evidence of his treason. He never got the chance to swing it. The heavy pneumatic doors of the server room burst open with a violent hiss. Preston froze, the chair still suspended awkwardly above his head. Victoria Sterling stepped into the blinding white light of the room. She was not alone. 4 heavily armed special agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation fanned out instantly, their hands resting cautiously on their tactical belts. I had not left anything to chance today. Exactly 24 hours ago, I had compiled his entire encrypted communication log and forwarded it directly to the federal authorities on a secure, timed release protocol. The heavy steel chair slipped from Preston's trembling hands and crashed onto the sterile floor tiles. "Mother," Preston choked out, his voice a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "Mother, you have to listen to me. This IT girl, she framed me. She is the one who sold the code." Victoria Sterling did not look at him like a mother looking at her child. She looked at him with the cold, dead calculation of a corporate titan staring at a catastrophic liability. There was absolutely zero affection left in her eyes. "I have already seen the audio transcripts," Victoria said, her voice echoing sharply against the glass walls. "You are completely disinherited. Your trust fund is permanently frozen, effective immediately. I have handed everything over to the authorities. You are no longer my son. You are a federal criminal." She turned to the lead agent and gave a short, dismissive nod. "Get this garbage out of my building." 2 agents moved with terrifying speed. They grabbed Preston by his expensive silk lapels, slammed him roughly against the glass wall, and wrenched his arms behind his back. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs echoed beautifully in the quiet room. Preston completely fell apart. He began sobbing uncontrollably, his face red and swollen, tears and snot dripping freely onto his ruined designer suit. As the agents dragged him backward toward the doors, he locked his panicked eyes on me. "Madeline," he shrieked, his voice cracking violently. "Please, just tell them it was a system error. Tell them the code malfunctioned. Please, I am begging you." I did not offer him a single word of comfort. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply picked up my ceramic mug, took a slow sip of my lukewarm coffee, and stared right through him. I watched in total, absolute silence as the elevator doors closed, cutting off his miserable wailing forever. The server room fell into a heavy, profound stillness. Victoria slowly approached my desk. She did not offer a hollow apology for her son's behavior. In our world, power does not apologize. Instead, she reached into her tailored jacket pocket and placed a single object gently on my glass desk. It was a matte black security card, completely devoid of any logos or names. It represented the supreme, unrestricted level of control over the entire Vanguard corporate infrastructure. "The board just finalized your promotion to Chief Technology Officer," Victoria stated flatly. "Do not let my network get breached again." She turned and walked out, leaving me entirely alone in my domain. I smiled, picking up the pitch-black card. It felt heavy and cold in my palm. I sat down in my chair, pulled my keyboard closer, and confidently typed the final command sequence to permanently shut down the Ghost Fleet simulation. The soft, rhythmic hum of the servers returned to their normal frequency. The silence of absolute, undisputed power filled the room. People like Preston always believe that being born at the finish line makes them invincible, but they completely misunderstand the brutal reality of the modern digital age. You do not need to be born at the finish line to win. You just have to be the person who holds the ultimate server access, because the one who controls the data is the one who truly decides where the finish line is for everyone else. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Boss Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.